Aziz Ansari, a changed man. According to The New Yorker, Aziz Ansari's new stand-up tour is a cry against extreme wokeness. There is a word for those that embrace what is called extreme wokeness, and most people on YouTube colloquially refer to them as social justice warriors. Although there are now people attempting to change the phrasing to something more direct, like social terrorist, which is a bit extreme in my opinion, but hey, don't take my word for it. I'm a rather centrist person. And you've got, look, people on one side, the illiberal reactionaries, of which I typically call them, will label everyone on the right, far right, conservative, Nazi, alt-right, etc. And then people on the other side will say SJW, but SJW isn't really understood by the average person. I don't want to get into that. We're going to talk about what happens when you push a man too far. Aziz Ansari is a celebrity. He's got a lot of influence. All right, he's a comedian. And apparently this New Yorker story, which we'll get into in just a second, is about how in his new show, he's angry about this, everyone's weighing on everything, everyone's mad about everything. And I think this is a really good example of what happens when you take a regular old comedian and accuse him of impropriety because he had a bad date. If you're not familiar, an article came out not too long ago, I think about a year now, almost a year, accusing, it was like a Me Too moment for Aziz Ansari because he had a bad date. It was really just a bad date. That's what it was. And because of it, it kind of derailed his career, at least according to this story. So they say, last week in Connecticut at a stop on the comedian Aziz Ansari's comeback tour, ticket holders were told to lock away their electronic devices before entering the venue. I think this is really dumb, who cares? And then it basically goes on and talks about how much people lock their phones away. It's dumb. Ansari has expressed a fondness for the smartphone, once telling his audience that social media has helped to usher in the least lonely generation. On Tuesday, addressing a sold-out crowd at the College Street Music Hall in New Haven, he took a more pessimistic view. He said, "I used to waste so much time just reading the news because there's so much of it. Now, all this stuff you're supposed to be mad about every day." If there is a particular source of this new wariness, Ansari never mentions it, but in his new tour, Working Out New Material, marks his return to public life after his Me Too controversy that quieted his career earlier this year. My God. I'm just going to stop right now and say, there are some writers who should be fired immediately for writing just like this. It's just not English, like this story's not that bad, but it is rather frustrating. The way they structure the sentences really aggravates me. Like, dude, just tell me what you're talking about. Don't use these weird sentence structures. So basically they talk about Babenet published 23-year-old woman's account of a harrowing date with the comedian. It's like, get these words out of here. This is the New Yorker, I guess. It's appealing to the r/I am very smart crowd. The article claimed that Ansari repeatedly pressured her into having sex, ignoring her refusals until she left his apartment, teary, in a car that he called for her. The next day, after she sent him a lengthy text message explaining how uncomfortable his behavior had made her, Ansari apologized. The piece, which was written by a reporter but relied almost entirely on the accuser's account, inspired a backlash. It seemed prurient and lazy. Some wondered whether the Me Too movement had gone too far. Many of the comedian's defenders at the time, among them the Times columnist Barry Weiss, pointed out that his behavior may have been aggressive or selfish, but differed substantially from the abuse committed by men like Harvey Weinstein. In a statement issued shortly after the account was published, Ansari described his interaction with the woman as completely consensual. Basically, Me Too, in some ways, has absolutely gone too far. It's always tough to say it did or it didn't. A lot of people are going to ask, a lot of people on the right are going to be like, of course it's gone too far. Well, I think in many areas it has gone too far, in many areas it hasn't gone far enough. We're still seeing people get called out for extremely aggressive behavior, for assaulting women, for raping women. Just recently, Les Moonves of, I believe, NBC, I think, what network is he, CBS? I don't know what networks he's with, but he's a big network head, right? Not too dissimilar to Weinstein, and he's in trouble. I haven't gone through the whole story. So there are still some areas where Me Too is making strides, but then we see Asia Argento, right? Yeah, she hooked up with a minor, and now she's still trying to defend her position. It's like, nah, dude, nah. I'm sorry. People ask, should, there's a question on OkCupid, would you date someone who doesn't support the Me Too movement? And a lot of women say no, some women say yes. And I think the question is simple. It's like, yes, because people like Asia Argento, who are leaders in the Me Too movement, are predators, and we shouldn't just be like, oh, no, everything's perfect. I think one of the biggest problems we have with tribalism is that people will never call out their own side. Plain and simple. Like, you have to hold your own side accountable. You can't ignore it. And then what ends up happening is protesters say snitches get stitches, and the police say don't cross the blue line, or the thin blue line, whatever it is. It's really funny when I talk to protesters about this stuff, and they're saying never talk to the cops. And I'm like, that's funny because the cops are saying never talk to the press. You know, you're doing the same exact thing. And so we have this situation now where Aziz Ansari was accused of a bad date, but it was like salacious. If you were to ask me, I'd say that Babenet wanted to get that hot story on a comedian, and so they rolled with it. They didn't corroborate, they didn't talk to Ansari, and then you actually had, like, apparently the story is written awfully. Like, this is a terrible article in the New Yorker, it's just really annoying. But they talk about how there was a protest outside of one of his shows, and I don't want to dig through it because this article is such garbage. So it says, the comedian positions self-righteous mass outrage as one pole in a political climate built on extremes. At least with the Trump people, he joked, I kind of know where they stand. On the other side, reacting to our current administration, are zealous and performative leftists who can't seem to resist competing with one another in what Ansari calls progressive Candy Crush. This punchline landed as a subtle, if unintentional, reference to a small group of Yale undergraduates who had congregated outside the venue earlier that evening before the first of the night's two performances to protest the comedian's appearance. Boycott Ansari's show, the description of a local Facebook event read. What he did and what it means cannot be forgotten. People were actually trying to protest Aziz Ansari because he had a bad date. And what do you think is going to happen to a man like Aziz Ansari, who is just a regular normie comedian, if you show up to protest his events over a bad date? He's going to complain about what you do in his show. And it's actually really funny. Again, I'm just going to stress how awful this article is. But there's an interesting point they make in the last paragraph. In his statement to Babenet in January, Ansari made a point of affirming the Me Too movement as necessary and long overdue. One might have hoped that nearly a year later, he could find a way to reckon with one of the movement's messiest lessons. That even men who wish to serve as allies of women can intentionally or not hurt them in private. Perhaps doing so might help Ansari to regain the trust of the women who feel that he has lost theirs. Why? Because he had a bad date? Instead, like other men who have reemerged in recent months, he seems to have channeled his experience into a diffuse bitterness. An early riff in the show centered on a pizza chain that Ansari said had come under fire for arranging pepperoni slices in the shape of a swastika. He described rumors that the image of the toppings had been digitally altered, then admitted that he had made the whole story up. Hearing this, the crowd erupted in laughter at its own gullibility. You people that are clapping, Ansari shouted, you're the fucking problem. Well, I wouldn't say he's wrong. Now, the story from the New Yorker goes into detail about, like, Louis C.K. If you're not familiar, Louis C.K. was engaging in self-pleasuring behavior in front of women. He wasn't touching them or anything like that, but it was still considered to be a big Me Too moment, and his career had been derailed over it. Well, he started doing shows again, and people are complaining that he's doing shows, and it's like, what do you expect them to do? Right? With Asia Argento being accused of what she did with Jimmy Bennett when he was 17, I'm not surprised she's denying it and accusing him of wrongdoing, because otherwise her life is over. What are you going to do? You're going to be homeless? You're going to go work McDonald's? No, they're going to do whatever they can to protect themselves. Louis C.K. is going to come out, and he's going to start doing shows again. Because what's his alternative? Not work at all? And what do you think Aziz Ansari is going to do after he gets attacked by, in the media by activists because he had a bad date? He's going to come back, but he's going to be angry about it. Yes, call it a diffuse bitterness, but I was talking to this activist person the other day. They posted on Facebook how they saw someone wearing a MAGA hat, and they went up to him and started swearing at them. I said, why would you do that? And they said, because people don't like having wrong opinions and it'll make them change their mind. I'm like, what? That's ridiculous. People don't change their mind when you attack them. They double down. It's a fact. And they started saying things like, yeah, but if they believe that, they're in the minority, they'll give up their opinions, they'll stop wearing the hat. And I'm like, dude, people know full well when they wear a MAGA hat and go outside that people are gonna rag on them for it. Right? They expect it. They don't care. And all it does is make them feel like they were right. They're like, yep, I knew it. The intolerant left, and they're going to double down on their beliefs. You want to convince people to join your side. You can't do it by lying about them. You can't do it by attacking them or insulting them. The result is someone like Aziz Ansari, who is massively influential, doing a show now where, according to the New Yorker, it's a cry against extreme wokeness. This article is basically saying that because of the Me Too controversy, this is what they say. Ansari's new tour, working out new material, marks his return to public life after the Me Too controversy that quieted his career earlier this year. Why? It's like this, the story about Ansari on Babenet was like, yeah, okay, it was like, you know, bad date. He didn't force someone to do anything. He wasn't like assaulting somebody. He wasn't holding a career over her head. It's just a bad date. Woman didn't like it. And that quieted his career. So naturally, you're now going to have some massive influential individuals coming out against this. And there you have it. So basically, I want to end by saying, my God, this New Yorker story is so painful to read because they can't just write a single sentence. It's like every sentence in this story has to have some break to include some unnecessary information. It's like, there was that one about the Yale students. It's like, dude, you don't need to tell me that they're Yale undergraduates. You can just say they're protesters outside. And this is one of the problems I have with modern journalism. It's like you know, there's a subreddit, I made the reference to this, r/I am very smart. And this is what it feels like reading. It's like so cringe-inducing. Dude, just seriously speak English. Speak English, write a simple story, but I'll tell you what, maybe it's because their editor said, look, you gotta fit 500 words in here, and they were like, all right, let's just jam a break into every sentence and fluff it up with useless information. Oh, whatever, the New Yorker's not so bad. I've got a New Yorker story hanging behind me in every video I make, so I think they're all right. They're not perfect. Anyway, stick around. I got a couple more videos coming up in just a few minutes.